In this video, we are doing what I'm going to be calling the RC Drift Rescue. This is a friend's MST RMX. We're going to be looking over it, seeing what's wrong with it, getting it tuned up so that he can hit the track and drift with us. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Troy. This is Roadside RC. On this channel, you'll find us doing all the things from bashing and crawling and drifting and racing. Today, we're beginning what we want to call RC Drift Rescue. There's a lot of folks out there who try to get into rear-wheel drive RC drifting and then really struggle to actually get the cars to drive right. They get frustrated, and what you see is a whole bunch of vehicles that end up getting sold on your Facebook Marketplace, on your eBays, wherever, and people just getting out of it when instead, man, maybe they would really like it. So today is one of the first ones of these that we're gonna do. So my friend, Mr. Nathan, handed me his MST RMX. Said, hey, it doesn't seem like it wants to hold a drift. Car's not very predictable in how it drives. Can you help me? So part one, and what we need to do this is we need to assess, like, what the heck are we dealing with? So what we're looking at is, it appears we have the standard MST motor from the Ready to Run, MST ESC from the Ready to Run. We got a Dean's connector soldered on. Our power switch is dangling. The motor appears to have been kind of just slapped on. A lot of times you'll see this ESC is actually mounted in underneath the motor here, which is good for weight bias, plus kind of gets it out of the way. So we're going to probably look at that. We do have some aftermarket body mounts, which is cool. I did not get a body with this car, so we're going to be testing it and setting it up without the body, and then have to change it later. I see we have one side of the battery mount. We do not have the other side of the battery mount. We are dealing with a DX5 rugged controller, Spektrum SR315 receiver. Looks like we have the standard MST servo, which surprisingly a lot of folks tend to burn those out, so but it's still running strong in this car. Comes with an Ozinki gyro. When I look at the gyro wiring, so yes, it is clearly wired into the servo. Other channel is plugged into channel 1 as it should. But look, sensor, the control wire for the gyro is not plugged in. So that means there is no control over the gyro from the controller. But we should be able to do that. This does have an auxiliary control, so depending on how that works, I'm not super familiar with the Spektrum, so we're gonna have to dive in and see, can we control the gyro from like the third channel on the radio or not. So right now it is set up manually. Otherwise, we're looking at an MST. I'm interested, we have the turnbuckle kit all around. It looks like potentially the titanium turnbuckle or steel turnbuckle kit that comes with the kit model of the MST RMX, but yet we have the Ready to Run electronics. So was this a Ready to Run that someone put the turnbuckles on at some point, or was it a kit and somebody just threw some cheapo electronic setup at it before they got rid of it and sold it to my buddy? Good question. Have the standard front bumper. Car looks like it's been, you know, it's been used, but it's been well taken care of. I'm not seeing a bunch of scratches on it. Does not look like it's been beat, basically, is what I'm getting at. A couple things I'm noticing. So somebody has been messing with the front alignment, but it does not look the same. I mean, I'm going to get my camber gauge out here in a minute, but the right front tire looks almost straight up and down. You can see the camber on the left front is cocked in. So our camber is not set the same. It looks like we are binding somewhere in the steering linkage when it gets near to full lock. We are binding up a little bit. We don't have a bunch of throw. We look like we're really stiff here. If we come up and look at the alignment, we are hard locked here. So we got to look at what is it that we're rubbing into. Looks like we're hitting the shock actually as that's turning. So we're gonna have to look at front alignment for sure. When we flip it around to the rear, even just looking at the tires and the wear pattern on the tires, you can see that we have some alignment to do at the rear of the car. Left rear tire, worn flat, worn smooth, has what looks like a fairly even contact patch on the whole tire. This right rear clearly cambered out and only hitting on the outside of the tire. So we're gonna need to fix that. So it looks like general alignment of the whole vehicle definitely is something that we need to go over. When we look at the shocks, these don't look like factory shocks. I'm not too sure. They have some fancy shock collars on them. Aluminum bodied, kind of odd. I don't know what those rear standoffs are down there at the bottom, but that's kind of odd. Does increase the ride height a little bit in the rear. It feels very, very, very stiff. If you look at this, there's no suspension compression there whatsoever. So that spring rate way too high for the rear of this vehicle. The front, if you can really notice that, when I compress the front, this side compresses, this side doesn't. We have one nasty shock here on the right front corner. I don't know if it's bent. This is where video doesn't translate feeling. It literally feels like metal on metal friction, just every time I try to operate that. So that is bad. We're gonna have to do something with that. I don't know if I don't think it's just needing oil. I think we're gonna end up throwing a set of shocks on this car, right? RC Drift shocks are important. So the fact that the rear is so stiff and setting up so high, not good. The alignment of all four wheels is not the same, and definitely that is something we need to go through. And then the front overall, the spring rate feels decent, maybe a little bit stiff, but this right front shock being kind of basically bound up is obviously an issue. So let's before we do anything with it, let me get a battery. Let's get it in here and try just here in the garage to drive it and see really what we're dealing with. Alright, gyro does what it's supposed to. You can see it's super clunky, it's like notchy. I think that's just the poor precision of that stock servo. But you can literally almost see it going and notching there. But it does work. It does look like we have good throw on the steering. So, in theory, car should drift. Now, I always say if you can do 3 things with your drift car, it'll tell you a lot about how it does. Can you do a simple circle? Can you do a figure 8? And can you do an oval? And doing those 3 things, just even in a small space like a 1-car garage, will teach you a lot. So let's give it a try. You can really find out really easily how a drift car is driving by a simple circle of various diameters, a figure 8, and an oval, and it tells you so much. So the figure 8 really helps tell you, does it drift to left and right the same? How does it transition? All that kind of stuff. It's also a pretty heavy, in a single car garage like I'm doing, it's a pretty heavy throw to go from one side to the other. And so does it catch it? How's that gyro working? How's the servo working? What's the suspension alignment like? The oval ends up being more of a sustained higher speed entry a little bit, really tells you how it adapts to that. And then the circle is just about controllability and how is that alignment set. Couple things, easily could tell. One, there's definitely a difference in how it drives left versus right. So the suspension is not symmetrical. Now, we already knew that. You can even just visually see that. Suspension is completely not symmetrical left and right. So a left-hand corner versus a right-hand corner, the car behaves completely differently. The second thing we can notice is transitions. High angle, it really doesn't like. You start to get a big angle, especially to the right, a big angle, and it'll lock up, it'll spin around really easily on you. Really hard to sustain that drift. The second thing about it is when you do get into a fairly large angle, it wants to crab walk. So I am guessing, the car wants to just kind of stay sideways and just move sideways instead of actually continuing to drift or continuing to straighten out, one or the other. It just wants to like stay moving sideways. That's crab walking. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the suspension. I'm going to put kind of a suspension alignment on it that I've seen in a couple of either my RMX that I use or my Sakura, and I'm going to look at those and test out a couple of suspension alignments. So that's step number one. Step number two is we're going to put different shocks on it. I'm going to build the Yeah Racing shocks, put them on. And then the third thing, move some of the components around. So we're going to move that ESC underneath the motor, put a little bit more of that weight in the rear. A Yokomo, the YG302 gyro. So I can test this compared to the Onsiki gyro, try to get it to where it works, the gyro gain via the controller. That'll be big. So move the ESC. We have these set of Yeah Racing Drift Cutis dampers. So put those on all four corners to get that acting right, alignment, and then we will be in good shape. Now first up is the alignment, and when we use our handy dandy RPM camber gauge, what we'll see is here on the rear, left rear tire is set at 0. Right rear tire is actually set at +3, so it's actually 3 degrees out. Now I know that with an RMX and the tires that we typically use, about a 1 degree negative camber is where we want to be, and so I'm going to adjust these upper turnbuckles on each side to get us to about a -1 degree. Okay, so here's what we've done so far. We've literally spent $0. Rear camber was it was 0 degrees on this side, and it was, I don't remember, like a +4 on this side. They're both set to -1, -1 now. So they're equal and they're just slightly in. On the front, at first the camber was way different side to side. We had -5 degrees on one, -2 degrees on the other. They're both now at a -6. It's equal on both sides. Also the same thing, the toe was rather straight, which made it a little bit unstable. So what I did is these rear turnbuckles, one of them was at 46 millimeters, one of them was at 45 millimeters. They're both now 44, which is going to give the car just a ever so slight toe out, help it track straight. But then also what that does is that helps give us a little bit more Ackerman angle than what it did before. So far I've spent $0, just spent a little bit of time on the workbench with a scale, my RPM camber gauge, and a 4mm wrench, and let's see how much better it drives. Okay, just like that, first drive, all we're doing is just tuning the suspension a little bit, just the alignment. And man, that made a world of difference. You know, when you have your car unbalanced, when the settings aren't the same side to side, when you have a fairly parallel Ackerman to where the car wants to crab walk a lot, makes a huge difference. Just getting that back to baseline basically is all I did. A little bit of negative, just kind of like baseline sets of -1 degree camber in the rear, 6 camber in the front, with just a little bit of toe out to help with the Ackerman. And there's more to be done. I mean, I could spend a day here tuning and fine tuning the suspension settings on this car, but I'm not going to. Right now we're still in the like, let's take the low hanging fruit. So the next step for us is putting on those nice shocks. When we do that, we're gonna have to reset our alignment again, because depending on the ride height, it may change the suspension alignment, but we'll put it right back to exactly where we just left it. These Yeah Racing Cutis damper set to see if we can improve the handling of this drift car. Okay, now we have the shocks installed. So we've done the alignment on the vehicle. We've installed these shocks, and man, all of a sudden, look at this. So much better than those old worn out shocks that were on there, right? Still not perfect. Again, I'm gonna leave a link to the video up here where I did the full install, the full build and install of these shocks on this car, including the testing and everything like that. I'll leave that link up here, but it's too long to include in this video. Now, the next couple things that we still need to do, I still want to move this ESC back into this lower position, clean some of that up. Really need to, though, figure out how to get it to where we can control the gyro from this DX5 Rugged. And so let me move this ESC back, and then we're going to plug in this random leftover plug into the auxiliary channel and see if we can't figure out how to use it. What I was able to do is go into the auxiliary assign on the controller, plug this into channel 3, tell auxiliary assign that it needs to be D, which is the front switch way up here in the front, make it linear. So now back here on the main control, as I change this front button up here, it actually changes the auxiliary input. I have it up at like 82%, and that gives me ability to control the gyro. If I put it at 0, it will turn the gyro off. So we now have control over the gyro from the controller, and I just set it up off of that auxiliary D on the front there. The last thing that we had to do to this vehicle was to compare this Onsiki gyro versus the Yokomo. And well, I'll be honest, I didn't even really hardly get to test it. So I plugged in the Yokomo, hooked it up to the controller, and there was something that this servo and this gyro did not like to cooperate with. It took it just a few minutes. Driving was okay. I was able to drive it a little bit, and that felt fine. I let the car sit powered on for, I mean, literally like 3 minutes, and all of a sudden I have no steering. And if I touch the servo, it is cooking. It is just absolutely overheating. And so that servo is now fried. And so not a fan of the Yokomo, much happier with Onsiki. We will be putting in one of these Zuske 20 kg servos in its place, just to make sure that we can get back up and running and calibrate everything with this servo. And with that final last change, we are now back up and running. Car is running better than it ever has. Really excited that we can help our friend Nathan out and get this thing in better shape. Now, be honest, this servo is not a great drift servo. There's no two ways about it. Something like the Rev D servo, especially paired with a Futaba gyro, will do a lot better. I've noticed now, since putting it in there, I'm getting more steering wobble than I ever did, even with the stock MST servo here. The other thing would be the gyro. So this Onsiki gyro is good. I certainly liked it better than the Yokomo, since the Yokomo immediately burned out this servo, of course. But Onsiki's good, but getting that Futaba, the GYD 450, it's the gyro that I run in all my other cars. It would make a big difference here. This car already handles so much better than it did when it came in. But I can't give it back yet. It doesn't feel right. Like, it's still hard to drive. It's still not as easy. It's still not as smooth to drive as I would really like it. And so we got to do more to it. And so what I've done, couple days have passed. I ordered the Futaba GYD 450 for it. This is literally my favorite servo for drifting, period, hands down. And this is really a little bit disappointing because I thought the car was actually driving really, really well with the stock MST servo and that Onsiki gyro. Man, but that combo actually worked really, really well. So if you have like a stock ready to run MST, getting that Onsiki gyro is probably a pretty decent idea. They seem like they matched really well. Car drove great. I enjoyed it. But, I put that Yokomo gyro on there and it immediately fried the dang thing. And so now I'm sitting here with the only servo I had was a Zusuke 20 kg. Plenty strong, but not a lot precise enough really for what we're trying to do. We're getting a lot of wobble out of it, that kind of thing, paired with Onsiki. So what we're going to do now is see, does this GYD 450 gyro, does it come in and save the day? Because man, I love how the thing drives. So I'm going to put it in. I'm actually not going to subject you to all of the install video. I'm going to make a whole separate video for just installing this in this car and getting it set up. We're going to come right back with the results. That right there is a wrap, folks. So we were able to take this MST RMX that someone was frustrated with, didn't like how it drives. Simple, fairly cheap actually, shock upgrade from Ya Racing, plus improved gyro. And look at that. The thing drives so much different alignment, different shocks, better gyro. Done. This car is now going to be a beautiful thing to drive. Only things that I will still say, the caveat that I have to it at this moment is I have this front suspension, I think even the rear suspension, I have them set really, really soft. I have them with the softest spring that the kit came with, but there's no body on it. So I'm really nervous, depending on how heavy the body is, that it'll really set this car down too low. We might need to swap over to some stiffer springs in order to truly appreciate and truly to accommodate whatever body is on it. He still needs another battery mount for this side so that battery doesn't come flying out. But other than that, we are in good shape. And I am really, really happy about that. We were able to take a car that wasn't running very well and really do just a few things to it and make it so much better. And man, this is why I always tell folks, do not cheap out on the gyro. It makes such a big difference with rear wheel drive drifting, such a big difference. Don't cheap out on the gyro. Now the last thing that we're gonna do with this, I'm gonna give it back to the owner. We're gonna take it to the drift track. We're gonna get some footage of this thing drifting.
computers for
I hope this was fun. I enjoyed this a lot. This whole RC drift rescue, right? Take a car, doesn't really drive that well, fix it. I'm gonna give it back to the owner so that we can be in each other's doors and having fun sliding around the track. In the meantime, please come over here, check out some other videos that we've got, and we will see you in the next one. So thank you and goodbye.